Ron, good afternoon. It's great to have you here today again. I hope you're enjoying the conference. This is our first ever virtual conference. Um, and we are really proud to deliver this conference over the 3 days. And we are really happy that you're joining with us across the world and with all the travel bans, you know, breaking those travel bans and joining with us today. We got many students from different countries who are not currently international students in Australia, and we are really glad to see our own students who are currently in Australia. So today we are talking about student leadership and student engagement in institutional governance. As we know, you international students are keen to get yourself in different opportunities, different platforms, especially as student leaders, as student volunteers, you'd like to experience different platforms, different leadership styles in Australia. So today we're going to focus on a specific model of leadership, which is the governance and decision making, how we can get you as international students in this decision making and governance. This panel session emphasizes the importance of the involvement of international students in governance at institutional, regional, local, state, and national level. Doesn't matter where you're coming from, if you are based in regional area or if you're based in an urban area, you're more than welcome to join us and share your thoughts, ask us questions. We are trying to help you out with these leadership skills. So as volunteers, as student leaders, you have been experiencing different leadership styles over the past few years. Now coming to Australia as an international student, it might be different from what you have experienced before back in your home country. So we're gonna give you a brief overview about what leadership styles, leadership opportunities, and opportunities to engage in the institutional governance we have in Australia. In the light of large number of international students on campuses, it is important that the international students are given an opportunity for intercession strategies, programs, policies, teaching strategies to improve cultural understanding, also better intercultural relationships, and emerge as future global leaders. So on our way to become a global leader, this is your session to get to know more strategies, more techniques, and opportunities from the experts in the industry. So this afternoon, I'm joined by fantastic speakers who have been speaking on this topic for the past few years, and they have raised a national and international voice on this topic. So let's get to our speakers today. We have Danielle Hartridge. Danielle has been an amazing supporter of CISA, not just CISA, but also international students. Danielle is a leading expert in the international education with an extensive experience working in the industry and also in the university sector. Danielle started off with the Monash University back in 1991, where she held the position of managing of international student support. During Danielle's engagement over the past years, Danielle made an important contribution to the establishment of nurturing of CISA in its formative years. As we know, today CISA is celebrating 10 years, and we should also thank Danielle and our past CISA family members for bringing CISA up to this level. Danielle has also being a strong advocate for international students across the higher education sector. And Danielle is the recipient of the prestigious IEAA Distinguished Contribution to International Education Award, the Victorian Multicultural Award for Service Delivery to Multicultural Victoria. And also she was awarded ISNR Life Membership. She has been the ISNR president in the past, and she has done amazing work to develop the sector and also to support international students. Danielle, we are really honored to have you here today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Danielle. Now let's get into our second speaker, Professor Sally Varnham. Professor Sally has been really vocal about student voice. Sally is a visiting professor of law at University of Technology, Sydney. Today, she's joining with us from New Zealand, and we are really glad to have you here today. She has been the student ombud chair of the academic board and also an elected member of the University Council. The University Council, which is the most important thing that we're going to talk about today. Her research was widely published in Australia and also abroad. She's the co-editor of Higher Education and Law, and also co-author of Law for Educators. Sally has started speaking on this topic over the past few years, and Sally has approached CISA to create a platform for international students to practice their leadership in institutions and also in different platforms to make decisions in the governance. In 2018, Sally established a Student Voice Australia pilot project, which had just 10 participant institutions, but it has gone across the country now. You can find more details from www.studentvoiceaustralia.com. In 2020, Student Voice Australia moved into phase 2 with new and existing participating institutions, while now it's hosted and led by the University of Adelaide. Sally remains very much engaged with the international students, and today she's joining us, and we are really grateful to have you here this afternoon.
Thank you, Kasun, for that great introduction.
Thanks, Sally. Now, our third speaker this afternoon, Bijay Sapkota, who's the immediate past president of the Council of International Students Australia. Bijay served 2 years as the president of CISA, or the past 2 years from 2018 to 2019, 2017 to 2019. Bijay has been an amazing student leader. He won the award for the best international student in New South Wales. Bijay has not just only contributed towards the international student community, but more broadly towards the international education sector through his engagement in different key committees, such as Council for International Education, Education Visa Consultative Committee, International Education Stakeholder Forum, Texas Student Advisory Group, ASQA Strategic Review Panel, and many more. He was awarded the Youth Inspiration Award in 2017 by Honorable Dr. Varnham, the former president of Nepal, and also he was awarded the NRNA Youth Person of the Year for his contribution to the broader community from 2017 to 2019. Bijay, we are really delighted to have you here today.
Thank you, Kasun, for the warm introduction. Look forward to a greater conversation next hour.
Thanks, Bijay. Let's get into the conversation which you all are waiting for. So this panel will empower international students to lead the community and be supportive of making global leaders. And this is just another step to support you to become that global leader that you always wanted to be. So I would like to start off with Danielle. Let's talk about the importance of international student engagement. Why do you think international students' engagement in different co-curricular and extracurricular activities is important alongside with their other academic activities? And also, we'll talk about what opportunities available for international students to engage in governance and practice leadership skills. Danielle, over to you. Danielle, you're on mute.
Okay, there we go. So Kasun, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. CISA holds a special place in my heart, having been there 10 years ago, and it's great to see them celebrating their 10th anniversary. So I'm very privileged to be here today to share my thoughts on this important topic. So I'm just going to start. I've got a few slides to go through, and one of the things that I wanted to just start by talking about is the hierarchy of student engagement and decision making. I think we've talked about this before, and looking at the many opportunities to get involved, because there's quite a number of opportunities for students. And we look at clubs and societies, you know, so they can be cultural, religious, academic, special interest groups that may exist on campuses. I think that's a great starting point and opportunity for students to get involved, and in each of them and play a very important role. You've got the mentoring, ambassador, host programs and opportunities often run by the universities and also other stakeholders who run programs as well. That gives students another opportunity. You've then got more at the institution level. You have international student associations and student unions and so forth, which presents another opportunity. Academic and faculty boards, so being in more formal representation on some of those groups. More what we're talking about today, I think, is probably reflects more on my experience working in the university sector, and I think there are more probably opportunities within the university sector to get involved, probably less so for some of the other sectors, and I think that's an interesting conversation that we need to have. I think particularly from a CISA point of view is how can we reach out to students in those other sectors that are not in the universities and get them more involved and get leadership opportunities for those as well. You then have at the state and regional representation. And then, of course, you have CISA, who's the peak body for international students studying in Australia. So you can see that there's various levels, and all of those levels actually need to be working together, because CISA, when they're called to a table to talk about some particular issue, they're really doing that on behalf of all international students in Australia. So they have to be mindful of what's actually happening at that sort of more at that club level, the issues that the students are experiencing at an institution level, at a state level, and so forth. One of the things that I've seen over the years is looking at whether it's in genuine engagement with students in the decision making, or whether it's tokenistic, and I have seen over the years more of the it's less so now, but I think, you know, having just let's have a student on the board, but let's not listen to what they're actually saying. So that's really important to make sure that when we do have students in those decision making groups, that they are being heard, and I think all groups have that potential to influence the decision making. So it's really, it's a nice way of putting it, it's the hierarchy, because really, you know, you have people up here who are the ones that may be speaking to government, but you've got to make sure that the issues that are happening at the very grassroots are actually being fed up. So it's how you actually achieve that. So as per the hierarchy, we talked about there are many opportunities to engage at the co-curricular and the extra-curricular level, and that might be within your institution. So obviously you look around and you look for those opportunities to engage within your institution. Volunteering is great, you know, so that might be that you participate maybe as a host for orientation or an ambassador program or a mentor program. So looking at what opportunities exist within your institution, but also looking at what opportunities exist outside the institution. And you'll know through, you know, me, I'm being sort of based in Victoria, that, you know, City of Melbourne has many opportunities for students to engage, and it's really trying to seek out those opportunities for you to get involved. And what you find is once you start getting involved in those activities, it becomes quite addictive. You know, you quite enjoy it. You start building your network, your friendships, and all those skills that come along with that of working together. Students who volunteer benefit from increased engagement with stakeholders. So once you start doing the volunteering and you're engaging with various stakeholders that you come across. So I think that's also very important, expanding your network and developing your skills and knowledge and your personal attributes as you start working with other people. And I think we've talked about the idea of being global citizen, and I think one of the big challenges that we have when we bring together very diverse communities is how those different cultures actually work together. So that's actually going to help you if you can work together within a very diverse group of students and achieve those outcomes, then that is a fantastic skill in itself to be able to do that. So just reflecting back on the hierarchy and the decision making, each will present their own opportunities. I think it's very important to know who all the stakeholders are. Even for people who work in international education, it can get quite confusing around the differences of, you know, the different government bodies, peak bodies, who are the stakeholders within the sector, and understanding the regulatory framework and the decision-making process at an institution, state and national level. I work particularly around the ESOS regulations, which is basically what providers have to comply with in order to offer courses to overseas students. And knowing what institutions are responsible for, I think, helps you as a student leader to be able to advocate and represent your students. International students are also protected under a number of laws as well, and it's important to know what those laws are, as well as the ESOS framework, and also the various stakeholders that you can go to for support and for help. And also understanding that students have the right to make a complaint or appeal a decision either at their institution level or through the OSO and so forth. So international student representatives should be aware of their regulatory requirements and know what action to take if a breach has occurred. So I think, you know, understanding to be engaged in that decision making and influence that decision making, I think it's really important that students have that understanding of that broader context of how all that, the stakeholders and how the whole sector works. So I think I'll stop there and pass it back to you.
Thanks, Danielle. I think you really gave a really informative overview, high-level overview of the opportunities available for international students in Australia. As you mentioned, I would like to link this back to Sally. There's opportunities for international students, but the question is if they're tokenistic, just solely for the representation purposes. So let's hear back from Sally again. Sally, I would like to know much more from you about the governance sector. So in institutions, we are making decisions. The governance bodies are making decisions. So how important that we include international students' opinion or voice in those committees, for example, academic boards, or for example, the councils. How important we get international student voice there, and also from that, how do international students benefit to become critical thinkers, decision makers in the future? Sally, over to you.
Thank you, Kasun, and thank you to everybody for the organisers of this conference and for which seems like an amazing event, and congratulations and thank you for inviting me to be on the panel. I really enjoy my interactions with CISA, and this is about, as Bijay said, I think about the 3rd or 4th year that I've spoken at CISA, and thank you once again for inviting me. Danielle has actually covered a lot of what I was going to say, but that's okay. There's nothing better than reinforcement. But she also went much wider into the university, international university life. But anyway, I will emphasise a few points. I feel very strongly that becoming involved in institutional decision making at any level, as Danielle said, in any way, at your institution is a win-win situation for both the institutions and the students and the sector. And I would say in these times of COVID and post-COVID, now more than ever, because I believe that universities are now going to be in the situation of reshaping in what they do. I think they've had a huge knock, and largely to do with the lack of international students being able to travel to Australia, etc. But I think that universities are all thinking about reshaping, and I think it's really, really important, if I say this at the beginning, that reshaping is done together with students, because in partnership, because that is really, really important. So what I like to talk about in terms of student engagement in university decision making or institutional decision making and governance is starting by the what, why, and how. What is difficult because it means student engagement means many different things to different people, and it means students feeling part of a supportive institution, students engaging in their own learning, which is obviously hugely important. Students working with their institution and shaping the direction of learning. And these are the sort of things that I'm talking about. Working together with their institutions in all matters like curriculum development, course delivery, etc., etc. And I'll be talking more about that later. And then the formal mechanisms for quality and governance and influencing higher education, tertiary education policy at a national level. So that's the what. Why is it important? Well, to me, it's a no-brainer. But as I said at the beginning, it is hugely important for the whole sector, for the students, and for the institutions. Because basically now, what an institutional higher education, tertiary education is all about is so much more transdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary. So what is the most important thing from post-school education is, in my top slide, the development of skills for critical thinking, innovation, leadership, citizenship. We talk more at the beginning, I think. Kasun mentioned being a global citizen. But all of these things are important not only for the future of your future and the future of your countries, but also in the short term for your employability. I like to think about how when you leave your institution, you'll either be making jobs or taking jobs. And I think that it is really important that you develop the skills of critical thinking and leadership and citizenship to be able to do that. And also retention and success through a feeling of belonging and empowerment within your institution. And importantly also seeing, for institutions, seeing that students, and for students, seeing that they can have a voice that is listened to and valued, and seeing changes secured on their behalf is really important, because institutions are all about the students. You're at the centre of everything that institutions do. And I think it is hugely important that there is no longer this "we know what's best for you" idea, but basically that you are working with the universities in securing the way your post-school education is delivered and what is delivered. And you do this by becoming involved in making the institutions listen to your voices. Things are changing so much in this area, and I think that it can only get better. So Danielle talked about student voice being not tokenistic, and this is has been a huge focus of mine, because when I started my work, a lot of institutions would say, oh, we do that because we have feedback and we have students on committees and councils and things. And I think it was my experience as chairing academic board of my university and being on my university council as for 8 years, 4 of them, I think it was 4 of them was with Bijay, is that it is, I think that institutions really have the idea now that it is really important to listen to student voice, that you are at the core, so it's important to work with students for students, but they don't know how to do it really, and they're only just starting to learn how to do it. And this is where you come in by helping them. And I think that Danielle made some really good points about understanding processes. If you're going to be on governance bodies, for example, understanding the difference between governance and management, and when you should have your voice in meetings or whatever. So understanding how the processes work, being prepared if you're involved in any of these governance bodies, being prepared when you come to the meeting so that you can persuade the universities how important it is that your voice is there. I would also say you have obviously the international student as your cohort, but if you're on as a student representative on a governance body, then you represent all students. So you really need to be in touch with, of course, to give the particular perspectives of your international student cohort, but also to remember that you speak for all students, and that's really important as well. Why the benefits for institutions and their staffs? Well, obviously, as I said before, post-COVID reshaping, it's vital for all rethinking of how universities are going to change, are going to operate, to be done in partnership with students. And as international students, you are hugely important to that rethinking and reshaping. It's really important that they understand that your needs, and they have a reputation as being in touch, and especially important for institutions to understand the perspective of international students and the particular needs of your cohort. And the only way they are really going to do that is if you make them listen, by being involved and being in or on whatever university, institutional or sector bodies that are available to you in whatever way. And Danielle I was going to go through some ways as well, but Danielle outlined a very comprehensive list of ways in which you can become involved. Students, if we're talking about employment, because that was part of the theme of this conference, students can have influence on employment strategies. Institutions are all really concerned about the employment of their graduates. And it's really, if you're in touch much more, or not much more, but you're really in touch with the world out there, and it is important that you feed that through to help institutions develop employment strategies to provide your perspective for relevance and applicability to your cohort. I don't think I'm going to go any further with that. I'll talk more about the ways of becoming involved, when I turn to the next question. But thank you.
Thanks, Sally. To reinforce what Sally mentioned, there was a clear message for international students. Yes, you are an international student, but do not confine yourself to just to that category. There is other opportunities beyond that. And what I have observed over the past few years, and I think most of you will agree, international students are confined to a triangle. They work, study, go home. So it's very few international students who step out and explore the opportunities at their institution. And one of the questions today from the audience is, where can they find these opportunities? So I think the best person to talk about this is one of the great student leaders, Bijay. So let's talk about we know that, as Danielle and Sally mentioned, we know that there's heaps of opportunities for international students. But the question is, are they making the most out of these opportunities? As we see, some students do not know about many of these opportunities. So can you be satisfied with the platforms offered to international students to develop their leadership traits? Why are students still lacking the knowledge about these opportunities available for them? And do you see if there's any hiccup in the current system?
Thank you very much for the question, Kasun. First and foremost, I'm really grateful to you guys for delivering this virtual conference amidst of the challenging COVID-19 situation. And it's great to see Sally. As always, we call her the godmother of students engagement, and everyone loves her. In the same time, thank you, Danielle. I guess Sally and Danielle have, given a very comprehensive presentation. I'll give a brief insight about the overall picture from a former CISA leader perspective. So in my tenure for the past 2 years, we had aligned few key priorities for the organization. One of the major ones was international students engagement in institutional governance. And when we talk about the opportunities, it's quite challenging to give a holistic perspective and say Australia has a great student engagement framework, because it's really dependent. Universities have a greater engagement opportunity, whilst their private colleges and a majority of them don't have great student representation, or they might not even have student associations. So later I'll give an example of how a student has been restricted to engage in an organization like CISA just because of the institution. So those are the kind of things. So therefore, it's very hard to make an overall assumption on how institutional governance or how these opportunities are available, on a holistic angle. Now, as Danielle and Sally previously mentioned, universities obviously provide more avenues than other institutions through engagement in clubs, societies. Now, if you talk about my engagement, I started off as a volunteer in a student activities club, and then joined student club, student society, and then led students through different avenues, and then joined institutional governance through faculty boards, university council, and CISA. And I'm a strong advocate of students' engagement in decision making, because you're a perfect example, Kasun. You joined CISA as a volunteer, and now you're leading a conversation. And you guys have actually broken my record in hosting the largest number of events in CISA this year. So now just touch base on your second question about how are students informed about these opportunities. Again, it's very dependent on institutions. When you talk about universities, not a lot of students are aware. Um, uh, and we've been making continuous remarks to universities saying that they should have more extensive orientation packages informing students about the opportunities available in the institution, because the future of work is changing, and the people who are engaged and who have that sort of like networking skills, and also if they get the opportunity to engage with senior leaders in the institution itself, it could really make a huge impact in their professional lives. And therefore, a lot needs to be done in this space in terms of marketing about these opportunities. Now, when you talk about vet institutions, it's extremely challenging because there's so many vet colleges which don't even have student associations, and I feel really sorry for a lot of vet institution students in Australia. They can't even be part of CISA because we require institutions to have a student association to be involved in CISA, and we have membership of like in a student association membership framework in CISA, and it's quite challenging. I just wanted to give an example of how a student was restricted. Like I guess there was a student, Kasun, you're aware of this, who wanted to run for an executive committee in CISA from Northern Territory. Unfortunately, her institution didn't have a student association, and we encouraged them to establish a student association, pay affiliation fee of CISA, which is just about a couple of $100. The institution didn't literally recognize the importance of that student association. And now that student, who was extremely active, and I've personally known her for a couple of years, couldn't get on board in CISA as an executive member. Now, there are a lot of people who've actually contributed in developing organizations such as CISA, and obviously CISA plays a vital role in making sure that this engagement conversation is disseminated into institutions. And Danielle is obviously one of those people who've contributed very well in the establishment of CISA as an organization. Now, one recommendation that I wanted to, I guess there's some participants from the regulatory body, and I had one recommendation. The major recommendation I have is for ASQA and regulatory bodies to have like students engagement avenues as part of a regulatory requirement. That way people can be more engaged, and institutions will be more obliged. And obviously national peak bodies such as CISA have a greater role to play in this. We need to do our level best to educate the broader stakeholders on why students engagement is important in decision-making processes, not just for students' welfare, but the institution itself. Australian education providers don't have a range of student cohorts, and one of the major cohort that's a huge contributor to the revenue of the university's international students. And obviously hearing from international students about their issues is absolutely important. The final point that I want to mention is, when students get onto these boards and committees, how can institutions make the most out of these students? It can only be made possible through adequate trainings. I remember myself, like I was elected in Faculty Board of Engineering and IT in my university, and to be honest with you, I really ran election and I had a lot of hopes to contribute in the board. However, I didn't have an idea that it's a strategic board, and as Sally mentioned before, there's a difference between understanding governance and management, and when you don't understand these, then you'll be lost in a board meeting. Therefore, even if students engage in a university perspective in those boards, it's extremely important that they're provided with adequate trainings about how to deal and how to engage more properly, and how to make meaningful contributions in the sector. So more broadly speaking, I have to be quite critical. There are opportunities, but when we compare the entire sector, I guess there's a lot of improvements and a lot of opportunities that might need to be provided to students to engage, and also for the betterment of both students and the institutions itself.
Thank you, Bijay. I think you really captured your experience as a student leader and who have been really active in the space. And also referring back what Danielle mentioned at the beginning of this session, we can see great products out of these leadership platforms. Today, we are joined by Gary Lee, who has been a classic example of student leaders, leaders who have benefited from these opportunities. So not just student leaders, but also the opportunities are available for other volunteering options as well. And referring back to CISA president starting from we have seen great leadership coming from the grassroots level, and it's important that we practice this, and the training should be given, as Bijay mentioned, to international students, especially mentorship, peer mentorship. I'm pretty sure Danielle's gonna speak on this as well. Danielle has wide range of experience across different sectors over the past 10 years. So there are hiccups, but I think international students have the responsibility to challenge themselves and come out of their comfort zone to experience better leadership profiles. So now moving on, let's get to the discussion where how we can improve things. Let's be solution oriented. And I would like to know from Sally, what recommendations do you have for international students? Could be current students or could be future students, to explore the available opportunities in the governance space at grassroots levels. Sally?
Thank you, Kasun. I think Danielle covered so many of the areas of her hugely broad list of ways in which international students can become involved. But I also, one of the biggest things I think that I can say to international students is learn about, and I think Danielle talked about this as well, learn about how your university, how your institution, not only your university, but how your institution operates. And so by doing that, you can identify the opportunities that there may be available. But the biggest thing I can say is be brave, ask questions. One of the things I put in my list, which is within institutions, and the same things as Danielle, but student associations and unions, taking executive roles in those, and as I think Kasun mentioned, or no, Bijay mentioned, if there isn't a student association, an international students association in your institution, then ask why and start a movement to start one. Be brave is my biggest bit of advice. I know it's very easy to say, but as someone who comes from the management and governance area of the university, universities would really, really welcome. As I said, they want to know how best to engage students, and they really welcome your putting yourselves forward in different ways and asking questions. The fourth thing on my list that's up on the PowerPoint here, class, course or subject representatives, is an absolutely, in my view, a brilliant way to get in there, to get known as being, a representative and having that ability to learn about how it works. So many institutions now, particularly the institutions that we work with in the pilot, in the Student Voice Australia pilot scheme, so many institutions have course representatives, whatever way they're organised. It could be classes, courses or subject representatives that are elected at the beginning of the year. Put yourself forward. If there aren't those representatives in your courses, then ask why, and suggest that would be a really good way for course coordinators, for the academics, to be in touch with the cohorts, all cohorts, but particularly in this context, international students. So on governance bodies, we've talked a lot about that, faculty, boards and committees, academic boards, senates, committees and council. But but it's a good way to start at, I think, to start at the first levels, like student associations and unions, student clubs, learn how it all works, and get knowledge behind you is really important. So you go in able to convince your institutions in the beginning how you should have your voice heard, but also how they should set up processes for having your voice heard, but also how you have really good things, really important things to say. And I think Bijay could have a lot more to say about this. Bijay and I were on University Council for how many years, Bijay? 4 years? 4 years together. But we were like a double act, I think, on University Council. However, it was really good. And then I think that we talked about this, or somebody it was mentioned before by Bijay or whatever. Nationally now, there is a whole move towards involving much greater involvement of national student bodies, like not only CISA but NUS and Kappa, in national decisions. I think that, you know, it's all part of a movement towards nothing about us without us, and I think that you can be armed to be part of that movement. National and state agencies, Bijay mentioned as well. I've said TEXA. I think TEXA has a student advisory group, but also in terms, and ASQA, I don't know what ASQA has at the moment, but they need to have students involved in university and institutional regulation, both those organisations, TEXA and ASQA. And I can actually say, I don't like to talk about New Zealand too much, but I'm back here and I'm really involved in the student voice moves here. And there is the Academic Quality Agency in New Zealand has students as part of the regulatory body, as does in the UK, the Quality Agency in the UK as well has students involved in regulation. I have to say that all of this is not our idea alone in Australia, that we're actually following on a big movement overseas in the UK. In England, there was the Student Engagement Project. In Scotland, there was Student Partnerships in Quality Scotland, SPARKS. In Ireland, there was the National Student Engagement Programme. And in different countries of Europe, they're very involved in student engagement as well. And also New Zealand, which has just released the Ministry of Education has just released a big report. They called for submissions on student voice and how it could be engaged. And if you're interested, there is the report available. The other thing I'd like to refer you to, because I realise that I'm just about out of time, what I'd like to refer you to is on my set of PowerPoints, which hopefully will be available to you. Is that right, Kasun? Yeah?
Yes, that's right.
There is the second to last PowerPoint has a whole bunch of links, and I would really recommend you to, I know it's our website, but the www.studentvoiceaustralia.com has recently, at the end of last year, we put up on that website, which has also a whole lot of background about how we establish our working towards increasing student voice in Australia generally. What was I going to say? There is at the end of last year, we completed good practice guides that we did together with students. Each good practice guide for effective and authentic student engagement was done together with institutional staff and students, and it resulted in 3 good practice guides which are available to you, which are also on the website. But one of them is a comprehensive list for universities and students about how to become engaged. So I would really recommend for institutions how to engage students in what areas and how to go about it basically, but also for students it is a really good resource for you to look at. And the other resource which I would really recommend you to is a training program for how to train student, because it is, as Bijay mentioned, it is hugely important, and I mentioned before, that you enter into this area and develop your knowledge, because that's how you're going to get into leadership and critical thinking, whatever, in this area, that you come over as knowing what you're talking about and having prepared. And the best way to do that is to build up a body of knowledge as to how your institution works. Look at what happens overseas in terms of student engagement, and have a look at those good practice guides, which I recommend you to as well. And take part in any training programs that your institution offers. Put your hand up for whatever, in whatever areas, for student representation. I think that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. We greatly appreciate your recommendations. Moving on, I think this is one of the questions from audience as well. Students want to know about what opportunities are available at different levels of leadership. I think Danielle is the best person to answer this question. Danielle, what are your recommendations for students who are interested in these different levels of leadership? Sorry, Danielle, you're on mute again.
Sorry. All right, thank you. So yeah, I think to look out for those opportunities, I mean, just be good start to read emails that come out, you know, when people are trying to communicate with you, and just that sort of look through that information. But just in terms of, you know, some tips that I'd like to share, I think it's really about starting to think about your engagement early in your journey. International students are not here for a long time, and you need to get onto it fairly quickly. And I think Bijay mentioned that orientation is really a good time to start thinking about some of those things. And you know, I know orientation can be quite overwhelming, that there's a lot going on at that time, but that's when you can start to talk to other students who are involved and work out what those opportunities are, because they will be different depending on which institution you go to, and there will be opportunities out there in the community. Look out and embrace the opportunities to develop your knowledge, skills and network. At the moment, everybody's gone crazy on Zoom meetings and webinars, and you know, they're happening all over the place. And what's great at the moment is a lot of them are free. So, you know, make the most of those opportunities, because, you know, while they're there, you know, I've become a bit of a Zoom junkie. I'm signing up for everything these days. So it's been really good to jump on and hear a lot of sessions. The extracurricular and co-curricular opportunities will enhance your resume and CV, make you stand out. So it's really important getting involved in those opportunities to make you stand out from everybody else. And that's what, you know, people are obviously going to look for. Volunteering delivers so many benefits. We've talked about that time and time again, about those often where students get started is through those volunteering opportunities. Step outside your comfort zone. I mean, a lot of these things are really difficult for students, can be quite intimidated, quite daunting. You've sort of got to push yourself a little bit to get outside of that comfort zone and to make to take that step. I think another really important one is to find a mentor, find a supporter, find someone who you can talk to, who you feel comfortable with. Not everyone is is potentially a good mentor. You know, it takes, I think, some special skills to be able to work with and support students. And when you have a mentor or a supporter, it doesn't mean that you have to do what they say or listen, you know, take on board their advice, everything that they tell you to do. You weigh that up yourself in terms of the advice that they give you. You sort of see how that sits with you. So it's really important to seek out those people and find those people who are going to support you and mentor you. And make the most of every opportunity. You know, the opportunities there, I think it's really important just to make the most of those opportunities. So I'm going to put in a little bit of a plug for ISANA as well. ISANA, who actually have members at various universities. They're in New Zealand as well. They have worked with students over many, many years. So often people within ISANA are good people to go to and to talk to about this particular issue and how to get involved. And they're also organising a lot of webinars that are free at the moment as well. So yeah, I'd seek out potentially ISANA as if you're looking for people who work within the sector, who might be able to support you in your leadership development as well. So I think that's all, but they're very, very different. You know, it's just really keeping you, once you start getting involved, you then become more aware of what opportunities are available. So the more you sort of expand your network and get to know more people, you'll find out a lot more about the opportunities that are available to you, but probably starting at the institution level and then through your study clusters and various groups like that. That's all from me.
Thanks, Danielle. I really want to acknowledge ISNA's support for international students, also for CISA as well. The president of ISNA, Bronwyn Gilson, joined us yesterday in morning with the session. Bronwyn and her team has been really supportive. So if you have any questions about leadership, please feel free to reach out to ISNA or us. Now, there are a lot of questions from the audience, how you can improve your leadership. Bijay, I think you have the answers with you. Please share your thoughts and your experience in the next few minutes, how to improve your leadership skills in Australia.
Look, first of all, to all the audience, I just want to let you know, post CISA, I'm involved in a number of companies, and one of them is Student Job Australia, which is the first employability portal for international students in Australia. Through Student Job Australia, I engage with a lot of big companies like Microsoft, Google, or AI Australia and other companies. Now, what I'm seeing is recruiters these days don't just care about your academic merits. And therefore, to all the students out there who are willing to be involved, it's the best way to go for your local experience. Recruiters don't generally look at just your academic grades, but they look at what you're doing extra and what extra steps you've taken to enhance your experience. And that extra experience can come through volunteering. Sally and Danielle have already outlined all the levels of volunteering engagement that you can have. Secondly, like take my example. I mean, when I started off as a student leader long time ago, it was I wasn't that experienced. And however, over the last 5 years, with all those efforts, now I actually own 5 companies, all on switch shares. So I haven't invested a single money. And you know what? When you actually get involved in governance bodies, organizations that have senior representatives, like as Sally mentioned, I was in a board with a distinguished person like herself who has had experience of over probably 30, 40 years or even 50 years. That actually, you have that additional experience when you engage with people like those. Therefore, step up. There are opportunities available. If you're really interested, obviously this webinar might not have covered everything. Have a look at the slides. Also, reach out to us. You can reach out to me personally on LinkedIn as well. I guess Kasun has shared my LinkedIn link about if you are willing to engage in organizations such as CISA, or if you want to know more about other engagement opportunities. I guess I could give you or able to give you a comprehensive guide in this manner. So yeah, just step on and don't be nervous. Your English might not be good. You might not have extensive experience beforehand, but take the dive, take the risk. If you don't take the risk, and if you don't take an additional step, the future might not hold too much opportunities for you. So just wanted to give everyone best wishes on their leadership journey.
Thanks, Bijay. To recap what Bijay said, and also a message from the audience, one of the students from the audience, take the best advantage out of it. The opportunities out there, just go, don't wait for it, grab it. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Danielle, for your amazing service to in CISA and also for ISNA. We are really grateful to you. Over the past 10 years, we have been really amazing and strong supporter of international students. Sally, you have leveled up the voice for international students in Australia. Now you are doing that in New Zealand. We are really grateful for your service. Bijay, thank you so much for your inspiration, and students will look up to you. Thank you for that guidance, and we really will continue this conversation in the future as we have always been. This is one of our top priorities. So thank you, everyone. Gary, thanks everyone for your support. Gary has been an amazing student leader supporting CISA and all other international students in Melbourne. Also, Bronwyn has been really supportive for international students in across the country, especially in Sydney and other areas as well. So please, we are here for you. If you want to develop your skills, join us, join tomorrow. There's a session at 1 p.m. We will look forward to seeing you all there tomorrow. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.